Our next storyteller has worked with congregations to support their growth, vitality, and mission. She, amongst many things, is a fantastic cook. So I just got to tell you that right now. I just had to throw that in there. She went to the Gulf Coast following Hurricane Katrina, to telling stories of those who received support from the Gulf Coast Relief Fund, and she has been a member of the Lexington community for how long? I don't know, but 20-some odd years, I don't know, but she's been here a long, long time. Will you please show a lot of love to Deb Weiner-Soule.
The terminal at Louis Armstrong Airport was buzzing with activity on that warm day in late April 2006. Musicians and native New Orleanians, many who had been driven away by the floods, were coming back. First jazz fest since Katrina, they said. The energy was palpable. I grabbed my suitcase and hurried out the door to find Martha Thompson, who was the on-site representative for the Unitarian Universalist Association UU Service Committee's Gulf Coast Relief Fund, which had now raised over $3 million. Part of Martha's work was to find organizations who would have been overlooked by other aid groups. I was there to tell their stories to the wider community on behalf of the UUA for whom I worked, to tell you where your money was going. Quickly, we were off to the 7th Ward, to the Treme, oldest Black neighborhood in America, where musicians and artists lived and created and helped to make the pulse of the city vibrate. Destruction was everywhere. Huge piles of trash on the curbs, no electricity, no water, no trash service. But in between the destruction, there were definite signs of life. People had rigged electricity, sometimes from blocks away, and they were gutting homes. In some cases, they were starting to wire and sheetrock the interiors. I sat on a stoop with a group of people from the neighborhood, blacks and whites together, who were working with a local group trying to help residents with modest incomes rebuild and stay in the city. And they were talking on this day about parades. Their energy was focused on reviving the local social aid and pleasure club and planning a jambalaya dinner for the residents and a second line parade. I was stunned. A parade? Your neighborhood is a mess, I thought to myself. You need electricity and running water and trash pickup, not a parade. Well, fortunately, I kept my thoughts in my head and they did not come out of my mouth. Good thing, because what I had totally missed, newcomer to the jazz city that I was the importance of cultural life to the heartbeat of the residents. Rip the electricity from the place, but New Orleans people will continue to live with a cultural richness that is worth gold. I was watching the heartbeat of the city, still alive and working to come back. That was only the beginning of 5 days that were both heartbreaking and beautiful. I spent part of one day in a house with a group of social activists who were camping out, driven from their homes by the floods, abandoned and ignored by the government, and determined to bring their work, their ministries, and their families back. And yet, these leaders would not give up. This was their land, sometimes going back for generations, and they would not be driven out by floodwaters or by the incompetent actions of bureaucrats. In that gathering was Tyrone Edwards, a minister, anti-racism educator, and social activist. He came from the east side of Plaquemines Parish, a narrow finger of land that runs alongside the Mississippi River into the Delta region. When the hurricane hit, Tyrone explained, his town of Phoenix, with levees on either side, filled up like a bathtub. It was near complete devastation. Martha Thompson told me that she had targeted Tyrone's Zion Travelers Cooperative Center as a recipient of the fund's money in order to help bring this town, a town with all Black residents in the Black part of Plaquemines Parish, back to life. I wanted to see Tyrone's town, and the next day, Martha and I met Tyrone in the city and headed down the river. Phoenix, what a name for a town that is trying to rise from the ashes, was dotted with a few FEMA trailers, but other than that, it was a pretty sad scene. His small church had been flooded, and the watermark was high on the walls. The church was being gutted, and it would be rebuilt. A construction trailer had been abandoned by a utility company just before the storm hit. They never came back for it, so Tyrone cleaned it out and got donations of hazmat suits, respirators, gloves, bleach, cleaning supplies, the things that people need to gut buildings and kill mold. Several women were set up outside with hot plates and burners, cooking food that Tyrone had picked up from the Red Cross and other agencies, I guess, to feed people trying to do this work. And there was a shed full of tools supplied by the UUSC Gulf Coast Relief Fund so that the work could go on. We walked around. He showed me the cemetery, telling me about the bodies that had floated away in the flood, bodies that he had to retrieve and then reinter. He told me about how he was not going to let his town die. He had taken as his motto the words of the book of Nehemiah, "Let us arise and rebuild." He was doing it for real. We drove around, and everywhere he stopped, talked to folks, and helped them keep on. Explaining permits to one person, checking in on another who'd been sick, finding kids outside who didn't have much to do but needed to study. He was a dynamo, and he had dreams of rebuilding this land, and I could see before me his vision for restoring that church and all that had been there before Katrina. My work took me on to Mississippi, to other meetings, and then home to Boston, where I filed my stories. The trip had made an impact on me, but most of all, Tyrone was there in my head. He was determined to save the world, his piece of it anyway, and although I wasn't sure if I would ever see him again, I found that I couldn't let him go either. Thank you.